It is October 9th, 2022. High above the veil of our atmosphere, where the air thins into the freezing reaches of the vacuum, a network of silent sentinels orbits the world. These are the eyes of the machine, the instruments of a species desperate to peer into the dark. They are designed to catch the faintest whispers of the abyss, the subtle movements of gravity, and the distant flickers of dying suns. But on this morning, the machines do not see a whisper. They are met with a scream. The Fermi Gamma Ray, Space Telescope, and the Neil Gehrels Swift Observatory are drifting through their routine orbits when the void ignites. It is not a light that human eyes could perceive, but to the silicon hearts and sapphire lenses of our satellites, it is a blinding cataclysm. The sensors do not merely record the event, they are overwhelmed by it. Imagine a delicate electrical circuit, built to measure the passage of electrons, suddenly struck by a bolt of lightning. The system does not fail, but it recoils. The data streams saturate, the pixels white out. For a brief, terrifying interval, the most advanced instruments ever constructed by human hands are rendered functionally blind by the sheer intensity of the cosmos. This surge of energy is an invisible tsunami, a wave of gamma radiation that has travelled across the terrifying expanse of the deep for 2,400,000,000 years. It began its journey in an epoch when Earth was a silent alien world of single-celled organisms, long before the first shadow of a leaf fell upon the soil. For eons, this pulse of light moved through the emptiness, crossing the vast deserts between galaxies, untouched and unseen, until it finally collided with the thin shell of our world. In the control rooms of Earth, the monitors flicker with impossible readings. Scientists stare at the data, searching for an error, a glitch in the mechanism. But the mechanism is functioning perfectly. The machine is simply reporting the truth of a universe that does not care for the limitations of its observers. The event is designated as Gamma Ray Burst 221009 Alpha, but in the hushed corridors of astrophysics, it will come to be known by a more primal name, the brightest of all time. It is a surge of energy so profound that it ionizes the upper reaches of our atmosphere, disturbing the very ions that allow our radios to sing. The Earth itself, a tiny speck of dust in the path of this cosmic fire, acts as a lightning rod for a storm that started on the other side of the known universe. We must look past the numbers to understand the scale of this catastrophe. To produce such a light, a star many times the mass of our own sun had to die. But this was no ordinary stellar death. This was a gravitational collapse so violent that the core of the star did not merely fade, it vanished into a singularity. In its final moments, the star collapsed inward, its outer layers falling at a significant fraction of the speed of light, crushed by a weight that defies the imagination. In the heart of this chaos, a black hole was born, a tear in the fabric of the tapestry that began to feast upon the very star that birthed it. The machine of the cosmos is a ruthless engine. As the black hole devoured the stellar remnants, it focused a portion of that matter into two narrow, concentrated jets of energy, screaming outward like the beams of a lighthouse designed by a vengeful god. By some improbable alignment of the celestial gears, one of those beams was pointed directly at us. For 2,400,000,000 years, the bullet was in the air. On October 9th, 2022, it finally struck. The atmosphere of our planet, usually perceived as a soft and life-giving cradle, reacted like a sensor being overloaded by a surge in a power grid. The high-energy photons from the burst slammed into the atoms of our air, stripping electrons from their orbits and creating a temporary layer of plasma that stretched across the sky. This was a physical manifestation of the scale paradox. A single event occurring in a nameless galaxy in the unreachable distance was physically altering the chemical composition of the air we breathe. It is a reminder that we are not shielded from the abyss. We are merely floating within it, subject to the inexorable laws of a mechanism that operates on a scale of time and energy that renders our entire history a mere footnote. As the light begins to fade, leaving only the afterglow for our telescopes to dissect, a profound melancholy settles over the observers. We realize that we have witnessed the birth of a remnant, a cold and lightless tomb where a sun once burned. The star is gone. Its light has passed us by, continuing its journey into the infinite dark destined to travel until the end of time itself. We are left only with the data, the digital echoes of a catastrophe that occurred before the first dinosaur walked the Earth. The universe is a symphony of these violent transitions, a tapestry woven from the threads of exploding stars and the silent growth of voids. Our satellites, those lonely probes of the vacuum, are the only witnesses we have to this eternal machinery. They sit in the dark watching for the next surge, the next pulse from the oblivion. We find ourselves in the position of the witness, the conscious mind that looks upon the cold, unfeeling mechanism of the cosmos and finds within it a sense of awe. It is a strange and beautiful irony that the same laws of physics which allow for such terrifying destruction also allow for the existence of the observer. The atoms in our bodies, the iron in our blood, and the calcium in our bones were forged in the same furnace of stellar death that we now watch through our lenses. We are the universe looking back at itself, a fragile consciousness trying to map the terrain of the abyss. On that morning in October, the light was so bright that it blinded us, but in that blindness, we saw the true nature of our home. We are residents of a vast and indifferent kingdom, governed by the ruthless laws of entropy and light, drifting through an epoch of silent sentinels and screaming stars. And as the machines return to their quiet vigil, we are left to contemplate our place in the symphony, knowing that the next pulse is already on its way, travelling through the dark, waiting for its moment to be seen. To understand the arrival of this pulse, we must first reconcile ourselves with the terrifying silence of its journey. The event we have named the brightest of all time did not begin as a spectacle for human eyes, nor was it a message intended for a conscious recipient. It was the mechanical output of a stellar engine reaching its inevitable point of failure. Deep within the region of space we have mapped as the constellation Sagitta, a massive star reached the end of its nuclear life. In the heart of this giant, the balance between the outward pressure of fusion and the inward crush of gravity finally broke. The core, an iron monument to a lifetime of burning, collapsed in a fraction of a second, vanishing into the singularity of a black hole. In that moment of catastrophic decay, the laws of physics demanded an accounting of energy. A pair of twin jets composed of gamma radiation and accelerated particles erupted from the poles of the dying star, punching through the outer layers of stellar gas and igniting the dark. One of these jets was oriented by chance toward a tiny, unremarkable coordinate in the void where our world would eventually be. 2,400,000,000 years ago, the bullet was fired. At that moment in the history of our planet, the surface was a desolate landscape of volcanic rock and shallow, toxic seas. The atmosphere was a thick haze of methane and carbon dioxide, devoid of the oxygen that would one day sustain the complex biology of the observers. Life on Earth was nothing more than a carpet of single-celled organisms, primitive blueprints of existence that would require 2 billion more years of evolution before they could even conceive of the stars. While these microscopic ancestors drifted in the primordial soup, the pulse was already halfway through its journey across the abyss. It moved through the intergalactic vacuum, a region of space so empty that it defies the human definition of nothingness. In these stretches of the void, a single atom might travel for 1,000 years without ever encountering another. The pulse was a ghost travelling through a graveyard, an energetic remnant of a star that had already been dead for an epoch. The journey of this light can be viewed as the operation of a vast and indifferent mechanism. There is no will behind the movement of a photon. It does not choose its path, nor does it possess the capacity for mercy. It follows the curvature of space-time as dictated by the distribution of the mass, a mathematical inevitability that has no regard for the civilizations it might encounter. As the beam travelled, it crossed the vast distances between galaxies, those islands of light separated by millions of light-years of absolute dark. It passed through the halos of dark matter that anchor the structure of the cosmos, moving with a speed that represents the absolute limit of the universe. To the pulse, The passage of 2,400,000,000 years was instantaneous, a consequence of the strange geometry of relativity. To the universe, it was a routine adjustment of entropy. But to the history of our world, it was the entire duration of complex life condensed into a single transit. As the pulse neared the Milky Way, it entered a neighbourhood of the universe that was starting to change. The galaxies were drifting further apart, driven by the inexorable expansion of the void. The light itself began to stretch, its wavelengths elongating as space expanded beneath it, yet it remained so concentrated and so fierce that it retained the power to strip the electrons from atoms millions of light years away. It was a spear of radiation aimed at the heart of our solar system. When the pulse finally crossed the threshold of our local group, the Earth had transformed. The dinosaurs had risen and fallen, their bones turned to stone by the slow grinding of the geological machine. The continents had torn themselves apart and reformed into the shapes we recognise today. Human beings had emerged from the forests, learned to harness fire and begun to build the first crude tools of observation. We were a new phenomenon, a fragile skin of consciousness stretched over a rock, unaware that a cataclysm from the deep past was about to intersect with our present. The vacuum through which the pulse travelled acted as a perfect conductor for its violence. In the emptiness there is no air to scatter the light, no dust thick enough to dim its intensity. It arrived at the edge of our solar system with nearly the same ferocity it possessed when it left the dying star in Sagitta. It swept past the icy remnants of the Oort cloud, those frozen sentinels that mark the boundary of our sun's influence. It rushed past the gas giants, the enormous spheres of hydrogen and helium that have stood watch for 4 billion years. To these celestial bodies, the pulse was a momentary flickering, a surge of energy that left no mark on their cold, indifferent surfaces. But for the Earth, shielded only by a thin layer of gas and a magnetic field, the arrival was a physical confrontation. We must imagine the scale of this collision. A beam of energy, generated by the collapse of a star 2,400,000,000 light-years away, was now interacting with the molecules of the air we breathe. The high-energy photons, having travelled across the abyss for an eternity, slammed into the nitrogen and oxygen of our atmosphere. This was the moment the machine of the universe touched the cradle of life. The impact was so severe that it caused the upper atmosphere to ionize, creating a temporary layer of plasma that hummed with the energy of a distant grave. Our satellites, the lonely probes we have placed in the silent dark to act as our eyes, were instantly overwhelmed. They were blinded by a light that was brighter than anything they had been designed to see. A surge of data that represented a catastrophe, occurring on a scale that rendered our entire scientific understanding a mere collection of footnotes. This is the ruthlessness of the cosmic machine. It does not wait for us to be ready. It does not announce its arrival with a warning. The pulse from Sagitta was a reminder that we live in a universe of transitions, where the death of a star in one corner of the oblivion can physically alter the conditions of a planet on the other side of the tapestry. We are residents of a realm governed by the laws of thermodynamics, where energy is never lost, only transformed. The light that struck us on that October morning was the final chapter of a story that began before the first mountain was raised on Earth. It was a bridge across the eons, a connection between the primordial chaos of the early universe and the digital precision of our modern age. As we look back at the journey of the pulse, we see the true nature of the void. It is not a place of peace, but a medium for the transmission of power. The 2,400,000,000 year transit was a testament to the endurance of the physical laws. In the silence of the abyss, the mechanism works without friction, carrying the echoes of destruction across the infinite dark. We are the witnesses to this machinery, the conscious observers who try to find meaning in the cold calculations of the stars. The light has passed us now, continuing its journey into the farther reaches of the universe, destined to travel until it eventually fades into the background radiation of the cosmos. We are left in the afterglow staring into the Sagitta void, knowing that we have been touched by the hand of a distant sun, a ghost from the deep past that reminded us of our precarious place in the symphony of the eternal. In the halls of our observatories, the silence was shattered not by sound, but by the absolute absence of data. For decades, we have cast our technological sentinels into the void, trusting in their ability to translate the chaotic whispers of the stars into the legible language of mathematics. We built these machines with a quiet arrogance, believing that the limits of our engineering could encompass the limits of reality itself. But on that morning in October, the universe revealed the fragility of this assumption. As the pulse from the constellation of Sagitta arrived, our primary instruments did not merely record a surge of energy. They underwent a profound and terrifying mechanical betrayal. They were blinded by the very light they were born to witness. To understand this catastrophe of measurement, we must first contemplate the mechanism of the sensors themselves. Our space-based telescopes are designed to catch individual photons, the tiny packets of light that have travelled across the abyss. They are like delicate nets cast into a dark ocean, hoping to catch the occasional shimmering fish. But the event from Sagitta was not a single fish. It was a tidal wave of fire. When the burst struck the detectors of the Neil Gehrels Swift Observatory and the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope, the sheer volume of incoming radiation exceeded their maximum capacity within a fraction of a millisecond. In the language of the engineers, this is known as saturation, but in the context of the cosmic narrative, it was a total collapse of the bridge between the observer and the observed. Imagine a circuit breaker in a humble dwelling, a device designed to manage the modest flow of electricity required to illuminate a room or power a clock. Now imagine that same circuit breaker suddenly forced to carry the entire electrical output of 10,000 cities. The copper melts, the safety mechanisms fail, and the flow of energy becomes an unstoppable force of destruction. This was the fate of our most advanced sensors. The silicon and gold of their circuitry were overwhelmed by a current of gamma rays so intense that the digital processors could no longer distinguish between one signal and the next. The data streams flatlined. On the monitors of the scientists waiting on Earth, the graphs did not show a peak. They showed a sudden jagged leap into the white void of the unknown, followed by a haunting silence. The machine of the universe had moved at a speed and with a violence that our fragile machinery could not translate. This was the saturation crisis, a moment of scientific panic that exposed the vast distance between our ambitions and the reality of the cosmos. For several crucial minutes, humanity was effectively blind to the most significant cosmic event in recorded history. The very tools we had crafted to master the dark had been rendered useless by the sheer magnitude of the light. We had designed our eyes to see the flicker of a candle, and the universe had responded by igniting a supernova in our front yard. The scientists, standing in their clean rooms and mission control centers, found themselves staring at empty screens, realizing that the primary data, the raw, direct evidence of the event, was lost forever, buried under the weight of its own intensity. In this moment of failure, the human spirit was forced to find a different path through the darkness. If the primary instruments were blinded, we would have to look at the shadows. We had to bypass the direct glare of the sun and instead examine the secondary reflections it left upon the tapestry of our world. This was a process of reconstruction, a desperate attempt to piece together the face of a god by looking at the footprints it left in the dust. Scientists began to turn their attention away from the saturated space telescopes and toward the more resilient, albeit indirect observers, the Earth's own atmosphere and the smaller, less specialized sensors that had caught only the edges of the storm. We began to look at the ionosphere, the upper layer of our atmosphere that acts as a protective shield against the harsh radiation of the void. While the satellites in orbit were being drowned by the pulse, the ionosphere was reacting to the impact in real time. The surge of gamma rays had ionized the gas molecules so violently that it created a sudden ionospheric disturbance, a measurable change in the way radio waves travel around the planet. By measuring these subtle shifts in terrestrial radio transmissions, researchers could begin to calculate the true power of the Sagitta burst. We were no longer looking at the light itself, but at the way the light had bruised the air we breathe. This was a profound shift in the scientific method. We were forced to acknowledge that the universe operates on scales that transcend our ability to measure directly. It was a reminder that the cosmos is not a laboratory where variables can be controlled, but a ruthless machine that operates with an inexorable logic of its own. Our tools are merely remnants of our desire to belong to something larger, yet they are limited by the very materials of which they are made. The silicon of our chips is a product of the Earth, a substance formed in the cool, stable conditions of a planetary crust. It was never intended to stare into the heart of a stellar collapse occurring 2,400,000,000 light-years away. The saturation crisis was not just a technical failure, it was an existential pivot. It forced us to confront the reality that there are events in the oblivion so powerful that they defy our attempts to capture them. We are like children trying to catch the wind in a butterfly net. The wind is real, and it has the power to uproot forests, but our net is only designed for the gentle flutter of wings. As we work to reconstruct the event from secondary reflections, we were reminded that our place in the cosmos is one of perpetual observation from the periphery. We are the witnesses of the afterglow, the chroniclers of the remnants. The data from the Sagitta pulse eventually began to trickle in from these indirect sources, allowing us to understand that we had witnessed a once-in-a-millennium catastrophe, but the lesson of the mechanical betrayal remained. The universe does not owe us a clear signal. It does not provide us with data that is conveniently scaled to our instruments. The machine of the cosmos is indifferent to our need for precision. It moves through its cycles of birth and decay, ignite and unravel, with a cold efficiency that ignores our presence entirely. Our failure to measure the peak of the pulse was a testament to the magnitude of the event itself, a reminder that the most important stories in the history of the universe are often the ones that are too bright for us to see. Now, as we sift through the echoes and the shadows, we find a new kind of knowledge. It is a knowledge born of humility, a realization that our understanding is always a fragmented tapestry, woven from the threads of what we were able to salvage from the storm. The saturation of our senses was a signal in itself, a declaration that we have reached a threshold where the power of the primordial void meets the limits of human ingenuity. We are left to ponder the vastness of the things we cannot measure, the depths of the abyss that remain silent because we lack the ears to hear them. In the wake of the saturation crisis, we do not merely see the universe more clearly, we see ourselves more clearly. As fragile observers clinging to a small rock, trying to make sense of a symphony that was playing long before we arrived and will continue long after we have faded back into the eternal dark. To understand the failure of our instruments, we must look beyond the charred circuits and saturated sensors toward the engine of the catastrophe itself. We must turn our gaze to the progenitor, a celestial titan that once stood as a sentinel in the primordial void, 2,400,000,000 light-years away. This was not a star like our own, a stable and gentle provider of warmth, but a blue giant of such staggering proportions that its very existence was a challenge to the laws of equilibrium. It possessed a mass 30 times that of our Sun, a scale that renders our local star a mere flickering candle in the presence of a forest fire. This star did not merely exist, it burned with a frantic, desperate intensity, a victim of its own colossal gravity. For several million years, this giant maintained a precarious balance, a symphony of opposing forces that defined its long epoch. At its heart, a nuclear furnace was ignited, a mechanism of fusion that pushed outward with the strength of 1,000,000,000 suns. Countering this was the inexorable weight of the star's own mass, a relentless pull inward that sought to crush everything into a single point of oblivion. For the duration of the star's life, these two forces were locked in a stalemate, a tension that held the abyss at bay. But the universe is a ruthless machine, and every engine eventually runs out of fuel. The star was destined to consume itself, moving through the elements of the periodic table with an increasing and frantic speed. Hydrogen gave way to helium, helium to carbon, and carbon to the heavier remnants of stellar alchemy. Each stage of this process was shorter than the last, a countdown to a catastrophe that had been written into the star's very foundations since the moment of its birth. The final chapter of this star's life began with the creation of iron. Unlike the lighter elements that preceded it, iron is a cosmic dead end. It cannot be fused to create more energy. Instead, it consumes the very heat that attempts to melt it. When the core of the star turned to iron, the outward pressure that had sustained it for eons vanished in an instant. The engine stalled. The stalemate was broken. What followed was not a slow decay, but the final, violent stroke of a massive planetary piston. Gravity, no longer opposed, claimed its prize with a speed that defies human comprehension. In a fraction of a second, a volume of matter several times the size of the Earth was crushed down to the dimensions of a city. This was the collapsor mechanism in its most primal form. The core of the star did not merely shrink, it imploded. The subatomic particles within it forced into such close proximity that the very structures of matter began to unravel. The electrons were crushed into protons, creating a sphere of pure neutrons of such density that a single teaspoon of its material would weigh as much as a mountain range. But even this was not enough to halt the inward plunge. The momentum of the collapse was so great that it transcended the limits of physical matter. The core passed the point of no return, crossing the event horizon and vanishing into a black hole, a permanent tear in the tapestry of the cosmos. As the core vanished into the abyss, the outer layers of the star were left suspended in the void, suddenly deprived of their foundation. They began to fall inward at a significant fraction of the speed of light, an ocean of plasma rushing toward the newly formed dark sun. But they were met by a rebound of such ferocity that it ignited the surrounding space. The infalling matter was caught in a magnetic whirlwind of incredible power. The rotation of the dying star, amplified by the collapse like a spinning ice skater drawing in her arms, twisted the magnetic fields into a tight, screaming spiral. This was the birth of the jets. The machine of the cosmos now acted as a gargantuan particle accelerator. From the poles of the black hole, two beams of pure energy and matter were ejected into the void. These relativistic jets were propelled at 99.99% the speed of light, a velocity so extreme that it began to warp the very passage of time for the particles within them. They were not merely light. They were a concentrated spear of gamma rays and kinetic fury, cutting through the remains of the star like a blade through silk. This was the pulse that would eventually find our world, a signal born of the ultimate destruction of a celestial giant. The collapsor is a mechanism of total transformation. It is the process by which a star is refined into a void, and its substance is converted into a scream that can be heard across the entire history of the universe. To look upon this event is to witness the universe functioning as a cold, efficient processor of entropy. The 30 solar masses of the original star were not lost. They were merely redistributed, some into the silent hunger of the black hole, and others into the blinding light of the jets. The star died so that the signal could live. It was a trade of matter for information, a sacrifice on a scale that makes our human history seem like a brief and silent whisper in a storm. We must see this collapse not as a tragedy, but as the inexorable logic of the vast machine we inhabit. The universe does not mourn its stars. It does not pause to reflect on the beauty of the blue giant that once occupied that coordinate in the abyss. It simply moves on to the next cycle of decay and rebirth, leaving behind only the remnants and the echoes for us to find. The Sagitta pulse was the exhaust of this engine, a thermal signature of a cosmic piston reaching the end of its stroke. As we sift through the data that overwhelmed our satellites, we are looking at the final desperate breath of a giant, a breath that travelled for billions of years across the eternal dark to tell us that, for a brief moment, something immense and terrible had occurred. The light of the jets was so focused, so intense, that it could be seen from the other side of the cosmos. If our eyes could perceive gamma rays, the night sky would have been briefly dominated by a light that outshone the entire Milky Way. Yet, for all its power, the event was silent. There is no medium in the void to carry the sound of a star collapsing. It is a silent symphony of destruction, a mechanical failure on a scale that transcends our senses. We are left only with the light, the cold and precise data of a catastrophe that happened long before our own world had even begun to form. This is the reality of the cosmos we strive to understand. It is a place of grand mechanisms and ruthless forces, where the birth of a black hole is merely a routine occurrence in the long decay of the void. We are the witnesses to this machine, the fragile observers who have built tools of silicon and glass to catch the stray sparks of its operation. The saturation crisis was our moment of contact with this reality, a moment when the sheer scale of the collapse mechanism proved to be more than our small corner of the universe could contain. We stood in the path of a beam of light that had been travelling since the universe was half its current age, a beam ignited by the death of a star 30 times the size of our Sun, and for a few seconds we were the most important point in the cosmos, simply because we were the ones who saw it. To understand the true nature of the Sagitta pulse, we must look beyond the chaos of the explosion and focus on the terrifying precision of its geometry. The universe is not merely a place of grand accidents. It is a mechanism of inexorable logic, and the relativistic jet is its most focused expression. When the massive star collapsed, it did not release its energy in a uniform sphere, fading equally in all directions like a candle in a dark room. Instead, the crushing weight of gravity and the frantic spin of the dying core acted as a cosmic forge, hammering the energy of 1,000 suns into a needle of light. This was a relativistic jet, a pillar of plasma and radiation accelerated to velocities that graze the very limit of what is possible in our reality. This jet was not a gentle glow. It was a spear of destruction, moving at 99.999% the speed of light. At such velocities, the laws of physics begin to distort in ways that challenge our comprehension. Time for the particles within the jet slows to a crawl, and the light they emit is thrown forward in a tight, concentrated cone. This phenomenon, known as relativistic beaming, is the reason the signal reached our world with such overwhelming ferocity. The energy was not shared with the rest of the cosmos. It was hoarded, focused, and aimed. Imagine a stadium floodlight, a gargantuan device designed to illuminate a vast field of play for tens of thousands of spectators. Now, imagine that the entire brilliance of that floodlight, every photon it produces, is somehow compressed until the beam is no wider than the pupil of a single human eye. If that beam were to find you, the intensity would be millions of times greater than the ambient light of the stadium. This is the geometry of the impossible that defined the Sagitta pulse. The star did not just die. It fired a warning shot across the abyss of 2 billion light-years, and by a coincidence of cosmic geometry that borders on the horrific, our small blue planet was the target. The precision required for this alignment is a testament to the cold, mechanical nature of the cosmos. As the beam travelled through the void, it crossed the vast emptiness between galaxies, a journey that lasted for eons. Over such a distance, the slightest deviation at the source, a tilt of a fraction of a single degree, would have caused the jet to miss our galaxy entirely. It would have passed through the dark matter and the cold gas of the intergalactic medium, a silent ghost of energy never to be witnessed by any eye. Yet the mechanism of the collapser held true. The magnetic fields of the dying star acted as a barrel of a great rifle, rifling the plasma and sending it on a trajectory that was perfectly, ruthlessly aligned with the coordinates of the Earth. We often speak of the universe as a tapestry of chance, but the Sagitta event reveals it as a machine of terrifying accuracy. The beam was so narrow that it could be likened to a laser pointer directed at a grain of sand from a distance of many miles. There was no room for error. The fact that the jet struck our world is not a sign of our importance, but a demonstration of the sheer number of such events occurring in the infinite dark. Out of the countless stars that perish in the void, one eventually finds us. We are simply the accidental witness to a shot fired long before our species had even learned to walk upright. The physics of this jet defy the imagination. As the matter is funneled by the twisting magnetic fields of the newly born black hole, it is subjected to forces that unravel the very nature of atoms. The pressure is so great that the light itself becomes a structural component of the jet, pushing the plasma outward against the resistance of the vacuum. This is the pointing flux, a flow of electromagnetic energy that acts as a piston, driving the jet through the outer layers of the dying star like a hot needle through wax. By the time the jet broke free from the star's surface, it was already a concentrated column of catastrophe, a sentinel of light announcing the birth of a void. In this moment, the universe operated with the cold efficiency of an engine. There was no waste, no hesitation. The 30 solar masses of the progenitor star were processed by the black hole, and the surplus energy was ejected in these twin jets, one pointing toward the northern heavens and the other toward the south. It was our fate to be positioned exactly along the axis of one of these pillars of fire. We were caught in the floodlight. The gamma rays that saturated our satellites were the direct, unshielded output of the star's internal engine, delivered to us with the same intensity they possessed when they first escaped the collapsing core, dimmed only by the inevitable expansion of space itself. As we analyze the data, we realize that we are looking at the ultimate limit of causality. The jet represents the maximum speed at which information can travel through the tapestry of the cosmos. Because it moves so close to the speed of light, the signal and the event arrived almost simultaneously. There was no warning. The light did not arrive ahead of the particles. They travelled as a single, unified front of energy. To an observer near the source, the star would seem to vanish, and the jet would appear in the same instant, a transition from matter to light that occurs in a heartbeat. This is the ruthless machine of the universe at work. It does not care about the civilizations that might lie in the path of its jets. It does not consider the fragility of the silicon chips and orbiting sensors we have placed in the heavens. It simply executes the laws of thermodynamics and relativity with a precision that transcends our notions of luck or destiny. The Sagitta pulse was a moment of perfect alignment in an indifferent abyss, a reminder that we live in a universe of vast scales and narrow margins. We are the inhabitants of a target we did not know existed, living in the path of mechanisms that can reach across 2 billion years to find us. The jet is a bridge of light between the primordial past and our precarious present. It is a reminder that the void is not empty, but filled with the crossing paths of a billion such beams, most of which will never strike a world or be recorded by a lens. We saw the Sagitta pulse because the geometry of the cosmos demanded it. We were the single eye in the stadium, and the universe, in its cold and mechanical operation, turned the floodlight directly toward us. In that moment of saturation, we were not just observing the universe, we were being touched by the inexorable logic of its most violent and precise engine, a machine that converts the death of stars into the light of the eternal. Yet, as the data from the Sagitta pulse began to settle into the hard drives of our observatories, a discrepancy emerged, a jagged edge in the smooth operation of the cosmic machine. In the high, thin air of the Sichuan province, upon the edge of the Tibetan plateau, the large high-altitude air shower observatory waited like a vast, silent sentinel. This facility, a network of thousands of detectors and pools of pure water, was designed to catch the rarest of cosmic visitors. When the light of the collapsing star reached our world, this array did not merely record a flash, it witnessed a paradox that threatens to unravel our understanding of the very fabric of the cosmos. Among the deluge of information, the sensors recorded several photons with energies reaching 18 tera-electron-volts. To the human mind, this number is a mere abstraction, a figure on a page, but in the realm of the ruthless machine, it is a defiance of the laws we thought were absolute. These are levels of energy that transcend the output of our most powerful particle accelerators by orders of magnitude. They are the screams of a dying star carried across the abyss with a ferocity that should have been extinguished long before it reached our shores. The paradox lies in the nature of the journey. The the light from the Sagitta pulse travelled for 2 billion years to reach the detectors on the Tibetan plateau. This journey was not through a pristine vacuum, but through a cosmos filled with the ghosts of ancient suns. Every star that has ever ignited and every galaxy that has ever formed has left behind a faint, pervasive glow known as the extragalactic background light. This is a sea of low-energy photons, a subtle fog that fills the void between the galaxies. According to the established mechanisms of physics, a high-energy photon, like those 18 tera electron-volt messengers, cannot traverse such a vast distance through this fog. When a gamma ray of such extreme energy encounters a photon of starlight, they should interact in a moment of mutual destruction. The two particles of light should collide and transform into matter, creating an electron and its antimatter counterpart, a positron. In this transaction, the high-energied light is devoured by the background glow of the universe. The farther the light travels, the thicker the fog becomes, and the less likely it is that any high-energy messenger could ever survive the passage. By all the calculations of our current epoch, 18 tera electron volts of energy should have been filtered out, absorbed by the inexorable logic of the cosmic engine long before the 2 billion year journey was complete. Yet, they arrived. This is the 18 tera electron volt paradox, a glitch in our map of the machine. It suggests that the universe is far more transparent than our theories allow, or that the light itself is behaving in a way that we have yet to decode. We find ourselves in the position of a mechanic who hears a sound in the engine that does not correspond to any known gear or belt. The pulse has revealed a hidden layer of the tapestry, a secret passage through the void that allows energy to transcend the barriers we believed were insurmountable. Some suggest that we are seeing the signature of new physics, a sign that the ruthless machine operates on principles that lie beyond the standard model. Perhaps, in the extreme environment of the gamma-ray jet, the photons were not alone. There are theories of hypothetical particles dark and elusive that could act as a shield. These particles, perhaps axions or other remnants of the primordial era, might have allowed the energy to bypass the starlight fog, transforming back into light only as they neared our world. If this is true, the Sagitta pulse was not just a message about the death of a star. It was a delivery from the dark sector of the universe, a hint that the void is inhabited by mechanisms we are only beginning to sense. Alternatively, the paradox might suggest that our understanding of the extragalactic background light is flawed. Perhaps the universe is emptier, or the fog thinner, than our instruments have led us to believe. But to accept this is to admit that our fundamental grasp of the history of starlight is incomplete. It would mean that the total output of all the galaxies across eons of time is different from what our models predict. Either the light is strange, or the void is strange. In either case, the machine is not functioning according to the blueprints we have drawn. We stand as the witnesses to this cosmic anomaly, looking out from our small, fragile world into a darkness that refuses to follow our rules. The 18 tera electron volt photons are like ghosts that have walked through a solid wall. They have survived a journey that should have ended in their annihilation, arriving at the large high-altitude air shower observatory as a challenge to our intellect. They remind us that our science is but a flickering candle in a vast and ancient cavern. We see the shapes on the walls and call them laws, but the pulse from 2 billion years ago has shown us that there are depths to the cavern that our light has yet to reach. This realization brings with it a sense of melancholic optimism. We are small, and our understanding is limited, but we are the only part of the machine that has begun to question its own operation. The paradox is not a failure, it is an invitation. It is the universe whispered into the ear of the observer, a hint that the symphony of the cosmos contains notes that we have not yet learned to hear. As we analyze the remnants of the Sagitta pulse, we are not just measuring light, we are attempting to read the fundamental code of existence. The ruthless machine continues its work, oblivious to our confusion. Stars will continue to collapse, black holes will continue to devour their progenitors, and jets of fire will continue to pierce the abyss. Most of these events will remain silent and unseen, their mysteries lost to the oblivion of space. but for a brief moment in the 21st century, the geometry of the cosmos aligned, and a beam of impossible light struck a mountain range on a small blue planet. In that moment, the universe gave up a secret, a glitch in its own inexorable logic, and left us to wonder what other miracles are hidden within the gears of the eternal. We are the inhabitants of a vast and complicated engine, and though we may never fully master its controls, we have seen enough to know that the machine is far more magnificent and far more mysterious than we ever dared to dream. The defiance of the Sagitta pulse forces us to confront a terrifying possibility, that the blueprints we have drawn for the universe are merely sketches of the surface, leaving the depths of the mechanism entirely unaccounted for. To understand the magnitude of this defiance, we must look into the heart of the engine, where the laws of electromagnetism act as the iron rails upon which all light must travel. Within the screaming vortex of a collapsing star, magnetic fields are twisted into coils of unimaginable power, seizing electrons and hurling them at speeds that graze the very limit of causality. As these particles spiral through the magnetic abyss, they shed energy in the form of light, a process known as synchrotron radiation. It is the signature of the cosmic furnace, the glow of the machine as it grinds matter into radiation. Yet, even this ruthless machine has its limits. The laws of physics dictate a ceiling, a fundamental threshold beyond which the energy of a single photon cannot rise through this mechanism. It is a point of equilibrium where the electron, in its frantic acceleration, loses energy as quickly as it gains it. This is the synchrotron limit, a boundary that should have acted as a wall, a terminal point for the brilliance of the dying star. But the pulse from 2 billion years ago did not recognize this wall. It shattered the ceiling of our expectations, delivering photons with energies that the standard models of the cosmos insist should not exist. When our instruments recorded particles reaching 18 tera-electron volts, they were not just seeing light, they were witnessing a catastrophe of theory. The gears of the standard model had slipped, revealing a hidden layer of reality that operates by a darker, more ancient logic. We are forced to ask what could possibly allow a particle of light to bypass the inexorable laws of the furnace. If the light was born from the standard mechanism, it should have been extinguished long before it reached such heights. This suggests that the universe possesses hidden gears, subatomic sentinels that move through the void without interacting with the fields we understand. In the silent chambers of theoretical physics, these ghosts are given a name: axions. They are particles of the dark sector, primordial remnants that are thought to permeate the tapestry of the cosmos, yet they remain nearly invisible to the flickering candles of our technology. The axion is a phantom of the abyss. It is a particle so light, so elusive, that it can pass through the core of a star or the thickness of a planet, as if they were made of nothing but shadows. In the violent crucible of a gamma-ray burst, the conditions may become so extreme that the standard laws of light begin to unravel. Here, in the heart of the catastrophe, ordinary photons may transcend their nature, transforming into axions. In this ghostly form, the energy of the explosion is no longer bound by the limits of the synchrotron burn-off. These dark particles do not glow, they do not scatter, they do not interact with the starlight fog that fills the void. They are the ultimate messengers, capable of crossing eons of space in total silence, unhindered by the barriers that consume ordinary radiation. As they approached our corner of the cosmos, these axions may have undergone a final metamorphosis, shifting back into the form of high-energy photons as they encountered the magnetic fields of our own galaxy. If this is the case, the 18 tera-electron-volt photons were not travellers in the traditional sense. They were masqueraders. They survived the journey across the abyss by hiding in the dark, travelling as something other than light, only to reveal their true nature at the very moment of their arrival. This would mean that the void is not merely an empty stage for the drama of matter, but a complex medium filled with invisible gears that can bridge the gap between the known and the unknown. This possibility changes everything we know about the history of the universe. It suggests that there is a parallel symphony playing alongside the one we hear, a dark melody of axions and other hidden particles that governs the flow of energy across the stars. We have spent centuries cataloguing the visible remnants of the cosmos, the glowing gas and the burning suns, but we have been blind to the machinery that moves within the shadows. The Sagitta pulse has provided a glimpse of the internal clockwork, a moment where the veil was pulled back to show that the vacuum is not a void, but a dense and intricate mechanism. To accept the existence of these dark particles is to admit that our science is still in its infancy. We are like children watching a great engine through a frosted window. We see the sparks and the movement of the pistons, but we do not understand the fuel or the invisible belts that connect the parts. The failure of the synchrotron limit is a reminder that the universe is under no obligation to be simple. It is a vast and indifferent architecture, designed for purposes we can barely conceive. The axion, if it exists, is a key to the dark sector, a realm that contains 5 times more mass than all the stars and galaxies combined. We are the inhabitants of a small island of light, surrounded by a vast and silent ocean of dark matter, and the pulse from the constellation of Sagitta is the first wave from that ocean to break upon our shores. This realization brings a profound sense of the scale paradox. We are investigating particles so small they have no measurable size, yet they are the only things that can explain the most powerful explosions in the history of the cosmos. The behavior of the infinitesimal is the only way to understand the behavior of the infinite. It is a reminder that the tapestry of existence is woven from threads that are invisible to the naked eye. Each photon that struck our detectors was a remnant of a star's death, but it was also a messenger from the primordial era, carrying the secrets of the dark sector across the abyss of time. The universe is a ruthless machine, but it is also a beautiful one. Its laws are inexorable, yet they allow for miracles of chance and geometry. The fact that we were able to detect this anomaly, that our instruments were tuned to the exact frequency of this cosmic glitch, is a testament to the power of the witness. We are the only part of the cosmic mechanism that seeks to understand the whole. We look into the void and see not just darkness, but a puzzle to be solved. We see the failure of our models not as a defeat, but as a gateway to a deeper truth. As we peer further into the mystery of the dark particles, we find ourselves standing on the edge of a new epoch of discovery. The standard model of physics, which has served as our guide for a century, is beginning to fray at the edges. It cannot account for the energy of the pulse, nor can it explain the missing mass of the galaxies. We are entering a period where the unseen will become as important as the seen. The abyss is beginning to speak, and we are finally learning how to listen. The light of the Sagitta pulse has long since passed us, continuing its journey into the eternal dark of the opposite horizon. But the impact of its arrival remains, a permanent scar on our understanding of the cosmos. It has taught us that the gears of the universe are more complex than we imagined, and that the void is inhabited by forces that transcend our current reach. We remain here, on our fragile world, watching the stars and waiting for the next hint of the magnificent machinery that hums beneath the surface of reality. We are the observers of an eternal symphony, and though we may only hear a few notes, we know that the music is far vaster and more ancient than the silence that surrounds it. The expectation of the scientific community was a return to the familiar silence of the void. In all our previous observations of the high-energy cosmos, the rule of the flash was absolute. A star collapses, a black hole feasts, or 2 neutron stars collide, and the resulting scream across the electromagnetic spectrum is as brief as it is violent. We are used to the ephemeral nature of catastrophes, where the light of a world-ending event arrives and departs in the span of a few heartbeats. But as the weeks bled into months, the Sagitta pulse defied the established rhythm of the universe. It did not vanish into the oblivion of the background radiation. Instead, it lingered, a low and steady thrumming that continued to register on our most sensitive radio telescopes long after the visible and gamma-ray signatures had supposedly exhausted their fuel. By the time 30 days had passed, the anomaly was no longer just the energy of the burst itself, but the unprecedented duration of its afterglow. In the history of our species' attempt to listen to the stars, we had never encountered a signal of such sustained intensity. It was as if we had witnessed a massive explosion, and, instead of the smoke clearing, the air itself remained glowing, vibrating with a heat that refused to dissipate. This was the lingering afterglow, a mechanical echo that suggested the gears of the cosmos had been pushed to a point of friction that our current models of physics could not explain. We began to view the event not as a singular explosion, but as the catastrophic overheat of a massive unseen engine. Imagine a machine of impossible proportions, a mechanism that spans the breadth of a star system, designed to churn through the very fabric of space and time. This engine has operated in the silent dark for eons, its movement so smooth and its fuel so efficient that it leaves no trace for our instruments to detect. But something went wrong. Perhaps a belt of dark matter slipped, or a gear of gravitational potential seized under the weight of the surrounding abyss. For a few frantic moments, the friction of this malfunction ignited the darkness, creating the pulse that first captured our attention. Yet, even after the initial fire was extinguished, the metal of the machine, the very structure of the local cosmos, remained white-hot. The radio signal we were receiving was the sound of that titanic engine cooling, the slow and inexorable release of thermal energy back into the void. For 3 months, the signal remained steady. For 6 months, it merely softened. By the time 200 days had elapsed since the initial detection, the afterglow was still detectable, a ghostly remnant of a process that seemed to transcend the laws of thermal decay. This longevity provided a new and haunting perspective on the ruthless machine of the universe. It reminded us that the scales of time upon which the cosmos operates are not synchronized with the frantic ticking of human clocks. To the universe, a period of several months is but a fleeting moment, a microsecond in the life of a galaxy. The fact that the signal lasted so long from our perspective was a testament to the sheer magnitude of the energy involved. It was a catastrophe so vast that its cooling phase alone outlasted the seasons of our planet. We stood as sentinels watching the data stream across our screens, realizing that we were listening to the heartbeat of a dying epoch. The signal was a fading echo in a silent room, a reminder that every action in the cosmos leaves a scar. The abyss does not forget easily. The energy that had been unleashed was now unraveling, spreading out into the eternal dark, becoming thinner and weaker with every passing hour, yet still retaining its core identity. It was a message written in the language of entropy, telling us that even the most powerful engines must eventually succumb to the cold. There is a profound melancholy in this realization. We often seek meaning in the stars, hoping to find a sign of intelligence or a purpose that mirrors our own. But the Sagitta afterglow offered no such comfort. It was a purely mechanical phenomenon, as indifferent to our observation as a falling stone is to the ground. It did not care if it was heard. It did not seek to communicate a truth or a warning. It was simply the result of inexorable laws playing out in the darkness. The signal was a remnant of a process that would have continued in exactly the same way, even if there had been no eyes to see it, and no minds to ponder its origin. We are merely the accidental witnesses to the cooling of a celestial furnace. This indifference is the true face of the cosmos. It is a vast tapestry of cause and effect, where the death of a star or the malfunction of a dark matter filament is nothing more than a change in the state of the machine. The beauty we find in it is a human imposition, a layer of poetry we drape over the cold and silent mechanism to make the vastness feel less terrifying. But beneath that poetry lies the ruthless reality of the void. The signal was fading because the energy was being reclaimed by the abyss, distributed so widely that it would eventually become indistinguishable from the background hum of the universe itself. As the signal reached its 1-year anniversary, it had become a mere whisper, a shadow of the roar that had first reached our world. Yet, in that whisper, there was a strange kind of majesty. It was the sound of a system returning to equilibrium. The catastrophe was over, and the machine was settling back into its primordial routine. We had watched the ignite, the burn, and the long, slow decay. We had seen the universe reveal a hidden gear, only for that gear to sink back into the shadows of the dark sector. The lingering afterglow taught us that the universe is patient. It can afford to spend months or years shedding the heat of a single moment of friction. It reminds us of our own fragility and the fleeting nature of our presence. We are like mayflies watching the slow cooling of a mountain of iron. To us, the process seems eternal, but in the grand symphony of the cosmos, it is merely a bridge between two silences. The echo of the Sagitta pulse is a reminder that we live in a world of remnants. Everything we see, from the light of the stars to the atoms in our own bodies, is the afterglow of some ancient and violent beginning. We are the inhabitants of the cooling embers. Our world, our sun, and our very consciousness are the products of a machine that has been running for 13,800,000,000 years. We are the result of the entropy that followed the greatest pulse of all. As we listen to the fading radio waves from a distant constellation, we are in fact listening to a mirror of our own history. We are seeing the process of creation and decay stripped of its complexity and revealed in its most basic mechanical form. The signal is a ghost, but it is a ghost that speaks of the fundamental nature of reality. It tells us that nothing is lost, only transformed, and that the silence of the void is never truly empty. It is filled with the echoes of everything that has ever been, a vast and silent library of every catastrophe and every ignite that has ever graced the dark. In the end, the signal did not stop so much as it merged with the infinite. It became part of the background, a single thread woven back into the tapestry of the cosmos. The detectors eventually found only the familiar static of the deep sky, the white noise of a universe that has forgotten its own outbursts. But for those who watched, the memory of the lingering afterglow remains. It is a reminder that the machine is still there, humming beneath the surface, and that at any moment another gear might slip, another spark might fly, and we will once again be called to witness the magnificent and terrible cooling of the eternal void. We remain on our small island, surrounded by the ocean of the dark, listening for the next echo to break against our shores, knowing that the music of the spheres is played on instruments of cold iron and silent light. This silence is the natural state of the machine. We often mistake the illumination of the night sky for a message, a sign that the universe is somehow aware of our presence, or has tailored its laws to foster the flame of life. But the truth is far more clinical. The cosmos is a system of inexorable logic, a vast and complex mechanism that operates without regard for the fragile minds that seek to understand it. The light that travels across the abyss is not a gift. It is the exhaust of a 13,800,000,000-year-old explosion, the thermal waste of a system attempting to find its final rest. To look into the heavens is not to see a gallery of gods, but to witness the venting of a colossal engine. When we observe a star, we are not seeing a beacon of hope, but a pressure valve. In the deep dark of the void, gravity acts as a relentless crushing force, pulling the primordial gases together with a violence that defies human comprehension. Under this immense weight, atoms are forced into a proximity that violates their very nature. They are crushed, broken, and fused. In this process of structural failure, energy is released. The light that floods our solar system is merely the byproduct of this celestial friction. It is the heat generated by the gears of the cosmos as they grind against one another in the dark. The universe does not ignite these fires to guide us. It ignites them because it has no choice. The logic of entropy demands that the pressure be released, that the energy be dissipated, and that the order of the early universe be slowly, methodically dismantled. We are the inhabitants of this exhaust. We are carbon-based organisms that have emerged from the soot and ash of ancient furnaces. Our very existence is a testament to the inefficiency of the machine. If the cosmos were a perfect system, there would be no heavy elements, no complex molecules, and no wandering sparks of consciousness to ask why the dark is so deep. But the machine is imperfect. It leaves behind remnants. It scatlets its waste products across the vacuum, and in those pockets of discarded material, life finds a way to flicker for a brief, inconsequential moment. We are the witnesses to the cooling of the eternal void, observing the transition from the frantic heat of the beginning to the silent oblivion of the end. The scale of this operation is so vast that it renders our sentimentality obsolete. A galaxy is not a home, it is a collection of billions of individual reactors, each spinning according to the mandates of angular momentum and general relativity. There is no mercy in a black hole, no malice in a supernova. These are simply the terminal states of a logic that began when the first spark of existence unravelled from the singularity. The laws of physics do not adjust themselves for the benefit of the observer. They are the rigid iron rails upon which the entire history of the universe must travel. Whether we are here to see it or not, the stars will continue to burn until their fuel is exhausted, and the galaxies will continue to drift apart until they are lost to one another in the expanding abyss. There is a certain cold majesty in this realization. By stripping away the human narrative, we are left with the raw, unvarnished reality of the mechanism. We see the universe as a sentinel of its own laws, a structure of such immense proportions that our entire history, from the first tool user to the last dreamer, is less than a single tick of the cosmic clock. We are like microscopic organisms living on the cooling radiator of a great ship, mistaking the warmth of the engine for the benevolence of the sea. The ship does not know we are there. It does not know it is moving. It simply follows the course laid out by the geometry of space and time. This is the indifferent logic of the cosmos. It is a symphony played on instruments of cold iron and silent light, where every note is determined by the inexorable pull of forces that existed long before the first eye opened to see them. The void does not hate us, but it does not love us either. It simply is. It is a theatre of catastrophe and creation, where the same gravity that forms a planet will eventually lead to its destruction. The atoms that compose our bodies were once part of the furious ignite of a dying sun, and one day they will return to the abyss, redistributed so widely that they will never again touch. This is the destiny of all things within the tapestry. In this phase of our understanding, we must confront the fact that we are the accidental recipients of a cosmic byproduct. Our sun is a middle-aged star, a stable fusion reactor that provides the energy necessary for our chemical processes to continue. But even this stability is an illusion born of our short lifespans. In the grand epoch of the universe, the sun is a fleeting spark, a momentary release of energy that will eventually subside into the darkness. When the pressure finally wins and the fuel is spent, the sun will shed its outer layers in a final, silent gasp of light, leaving behind a white dwarf, a cooling ember in the vast, indifferent night. We find ourselves in a position of melancholic optimism. We are the only part of the machine that knows it is a machine. We are the logic of the universe becoming aware of itself, peering through the exhaust to catch a glimpse of the gears. This does not make us special in the eyes of the cosmos, but it makes our perspective unique. We are the only ones who can appreciate the terrible beauty of the mechanism. We can measure the distance to the furthest galaxies, calculate the mass of invisible holes in space, and predict the eventual decay of the very atoms we are made of. We are the tiny, flickering candles that allow the darkness to be seen. As we look out across the reach of the dark sector, we see the remnants of 1 billion catastrophes. Every nebula is a graveyard of stars, every planet a fragment of a larger collision. The universe is a graveyard of its own history, a place where nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed into a lower state of energy. The cycle of ignite and decay is the heartbeat of the cosmos, a rhythmic pulse that has been beating for billions of years and will continue for trillions more. We are a single beat of that heart, a momentary fluctuation in the great background hum of reality. The machine does not require our worship, and it does not heed our prayers. It only demands that we follow its rules. We are bound by the same laws as the furthest quasar and the smallest subatomic particle. We are part of the inexorable flow of entropy, moving toward a future where all the light has been spent and all the heat has been dissipated. But in the meantime, while the engine is still running and the exhaust is still bright, we have the privilege of being the witness. We are the eyes of the universe, looking back at itself through the smoke of a primordial explosion, marveling at the cold, beautiful logic of it all. We remain on our small island, surrounded by the ocean of the dark, knowing that our presence is a mere ripple on the surface of an infinite and indifferent sea. The signal has faded, the stars are cooling, and the machine continues its silent, eternal work in the void. As the last photons of the primordial fire drift into the infinite distance, we must accept that the current era of light is but a fleeting spark in the dark history of the whole. We exist in the briefest of windows, a sliver of time when the stars are still burning and the galaxies are still close enough to be seen. But the machine is relentless. The inexorable march of entropy ensures that every gallon of cosmic fuel will eventually be consumed, and every source of warmth will eventually surrender to the absolute zero of the void. 100 trillion years from now, the era of the stars will draw to a close. The massive, brilliant blue giants were the first to go, burning through their lives in a few million years. Then followed the stars like our own sun, stable and persistent, but ultimately finite. Finally, only the red dwarfs remain, small, dim sentinels of a fading epoch. These stars, which can burn for trillions of years, are the final hearths of the universe. They are the cooling embers of a fire that once illuminated the entire tapestry of space. But even they must succumb. When the last red dwarf exhausts its hydrogen, the universe will enter a new and darker age. The lights are being turned off one by one, and there is no hand to flip the switch back on. In this coming era of darkness, the remnants of our world will be nothing more than cold cinders. The planets, once vibrant and teeming with the chemistry of life, will be frozen husks orbiting dead stars. The very atoms that compose our bodies, the iron in our blood and the calcium in our bones, will begin to face their own internal decay. If the theories of the subatomic world hold true, then even the proton, the fundamental building block of matter, is not eternal. After a span of time so vast that the human mind cannot begin to calculate it, perhaps 10 to the power of 34 years, the matter itself will begin to dissolve. The mountain and the man, the star and the dust will all unravel into a spray of light and radiation, returning to the void from which they were once borrowed. This is the ruthless machine at its most efficient. It is a process of total liquidation, where every structure, every memory and every physical monument is erased. The universe does not preserve its history in stone or gold. It eventually grinds all things back into the abyss. We are witnessing the ultimate victory of the void, and yet it is precisely within this context of impending oblivion that the human presence takes on its most profound meaning. We are the witness. We are the improbable result of 5 billion years of planetary evolution, the accidental observers of a 14 billion-year-old symphony. We are the only part of the cosmos that has developed the capacity to look back at the mechanism and ask why it exists. The universe is vast beyond measure, cold beyond endurance, and indifferent beyond comprehension, yet it has produced us, small, fragile creatures who possess the audacity to measure the friction of the very gears that will eventually grind us to dust. There is a unique courage in the act of observation. To look into the mouth of the abyss and refuse to blink is the defining characteristic of our species. We have spent our brief moment in the light mapping the stars we will never visit and cataloguing the laws of a reality that does not care if we understand it. We have built telescopes to see the beginning of time and mathematics to predict its end. We are the only ones who can see the tragedy of the cosmos, and in seeing it, we transcend the cold logic of the machine. Think of the lonely probes we have sent into the dark. They are tiny fragments of our will, carrying our voices into the silent reaches of interstellar space. Long after our sun has expanded and consumed the earth, long after our species has vanished into the folds of time, these metallic messengers will continue to drift. They are the remnants of a civilization that dared to say, "I was here." They are monuments to the witness. They carry the record of our music, our laughter, and our tears into a future where there is no one left to listen. This is the melancholic optimism of the human condition. We know that the engine is running out of fuel. We know that the stars are going dark and that the horizon of the observable universe is receding from our reach. We know that eventually the dark sector will swallow everything we have ever loved. But we do not turn away. Instead, we lean in closer. We refine our instruments, we sharpen our logic, and we continue to watch. We choose to be the eyes of the universe even as it prepares to close them forever. The beauty of the cosmos is not found in its permanence, for it has none. Its beauty is found in its fragility, in the way a single spark of consciousness can illuminate the entire abyss for a heartbeat. We are that spark. We are the momentary flicker that allows the void to know itself. Without the witness, the universe would be a silent machine working in total darkness, a collection of objects with no one to name them. Because we are here, the stars have names. Because we are here, the collision of galaxies is a spectacle rather than a mere redistribution of mass. As we peer toward the far future, toward the era of black holes and the eventual heat death of all things, we find a strange peace. The machine is not our enemy, it is our origin. We are the exhaust of the stars, the dust of ancient catastrophes reorganized into a thinking mind. Our journey is a brief excursion from the eternal silence, a chance to see the lights before they fade. We do not need the universe to be eternal for our lives to have meaning. The meaning is in the act of seeing, in the privilege of the perspective. The signal is indeed growing faint. The expansion of space is stretching the light of distant galaxies until it is too weak to detect. The cosmic microwave background, the last echo of the primordial explosion, is cooling toward the absolute zero of the end. We're standing on the shore of an infinite and darkening sea, watching the tide go out for the last time. But as we stand there, we can still marvel at the logic of the waves. We can still appreciate the intricate tapestry of the laws of physics that allowed us to exist at all. In the end, there will be nothing but the void. No stars, no planets, no atoms, and no memories. The universe will return to a state of perfect, silent equilibrium, a dark ocean with no ripples. Oblivion is the final destination of every epoch, but that does not invalidate the journey. The fact that the story ends in silence does not mean the story was not worth telling. We have been the audience for the greatest show in existence, and for a few million years we were also the stars. We remain the sentinel, the observer, the one who watches the light decay. We are the logic that stares back at the chaos. And though the gears of the machine will eventually dismantle everything we are, they cannot take away the fact that for one brief glorious moment, we existed, and we saw. The witness remains, if only in the indelible fact of its having been. The dark is coming, but we have seen the light, and that is enough. The machine continues its silent work, the stars prepare for their long sleep, and we, the children of the stars, find our rest in the beautiful, terrible, and eternal truth of the cosmos.